I'm just starting to record, and Lao sure just left the scene. Where did you go?
Okay. Yeah, there we go.
There you are.
Okay.
All right.
I wanted to center the computer camera so
Okay.
that it's a little better headshot. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Wow, you've got that whole white wall behind you. So, how are you?
I am well. That's a very interesting term for a Taoist because when a Taoist says I'm doing well, it doesn't mean things are going the way I want, which is what a Westerner means when they say they're doing well. It means that however the currents or flow of life is going, I am adjusting to it and flowing well with it. So I'm well.
Well, you look well. You look very good.
Well,
So what I wanted to start with in our next podcast is to really go to the basics, because some of my listeners may not understand even what Taoism is. And it's a big term, and it can be, we have the Tao of poo, the Tao of everything, right? So just what is Taoism, and is it a religion? Is it a philosophy? What's your view?
Okay. Taoism is big enough to encompass all of them, but it is none of them. Taoism is a very, very straightforward, simple thing, although the implications go in every direction. It is simply the process of processes in which you come to understand your nature, and then through accepting and understanding your nature, harmonizing it and making it accord with all nature. Simple as that. There's nothing more, there's nothing less.
So is it a religion?
It can be. I get a lot of trouble for this, but I have to be honest. Taoism is not Chinese. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu is very, very, very explicit. It is older than God. I do not know where it comes from. If it's older than God, if it is outside of the parameters of God, then no, it cannot in fact be exclusively fit into a box of known as religion. Although it will encompass all religions. You can be a Taoist and a Christian. Where people see the robes, the hat, the whisk, they are seeing Chinese folk religion injected into Taoism, because Chinese folk religion and Chinese cultural society, which is based on Confucianism, it formed out of what had already been a Taoist way of living for centuries.
So are you talking about the bone tradition in China?
Right. So you have the Wu, the Jianghu, you have all these people that's very shamanistic. This is when China was still matriarchal, and the Yellow Emperor was not the original progenitor. That came from Confucius on. Before it was the Royal Western Mother. She was the mother of China. And so it was never good, bad, right, wrong. It was simply yin, yang. It was simply a contextual thing. When polite Chinese society with their most unworthies came about, polite people said yes meant yes, no meant no, that's it. If you say anything other than yes or no, you're obfuscating, and you're one of them trickies. You're one of them Jianghu. You're one of those ones that are just trying to take me for a ride. And so Taoists became considered those crazy people, because Taoists believe the first rule of the universe is maybe. What's the context? Maybe is everything. And therefore, when you deal with Taoism, you're literally dealing with the process of processes, because each human goes through several processes. So all of those processes are stages in a bigger process. So it's the process of processes by which you come to understand your nature. And then once you understand and accept your nature, harmonizing it with all nature.
So let me ask you, just I want to talk a little bit more about nature, but what is the difference between Taoism and Confucianism?
So Taoism is the basic concept in China that emerged, which you could say theoretically was a stream, and it's highly debated, but all compelling evidence says that Taoism is the most unfiltered, unaltered stream of the perennial wisdom tradition that sort of permeates all cultures. Yogis in India, the Buddhists, the Bon Po, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, right? These mystery traditions, these perennial wisdom traditions that have these meta truths that we still quote today. Taoism was what sort of happened in China. Confucianism. Now there were 7 separate states or countries within what we call China today. It wasn't one country. And the Emperor of Qin said, every one of you are going to bow to my banner and kneel before me. I'm going to be the king of a united China. Qin is where China comes from. And so the concept for this guy from the state of Lu was, Confucius. And he basically says, listen, we've got to get order. You've got people from Zhou who hate Qin, people from Wu who hate Zhou, and they hate each other. It's kind of like if you think about the Cold War with the Ruskies and the Americans and the damn Ruskies, and they're just coming over. I know Red Dawn's happening, right? We had that enmity against people we didn't even know. They had it 100 times worse in China in those days. So if you saw a man from Zhou, you're likely to kill him if you're from Qin. You wouldn't even but you're, DNA wise and then hereditary, I mean, he could be like a cousin. You wouldn't even know. He's from Zhou, kill him. So Confucius said, look, we've got to find a way to put a structured set of rules in place. But they used Taoism. They co-opted Taoism. So Taoism says, well, heaven is yang and earth is yin. Men are yang and women are yin. High is yang, low is yin. And Confucius said, okay, we all sort of believe that. We all sort of go with these concepts. It's very pan-Chinese. So if heaven is above earth and heaven is yang and earth is yin, well, men are yang, women are yin, so men are above women. Shit. And of course, all the guys are like, seems legit.
So it was just really taken super literally rather than because it was never meant to be that literal.
Right. And all the Taoists were like, oh, please, oh, Jesus, stop it. But you couldn't. And a lot of the Taoist texts have men's names on it, but there's enough evidence to say you could make a case that a few of them specifically, the way they write, that they were written by women, but you couldn't put a woman's name on a book or they'd burn it. So it was like.
Women were educated?
For Taoist women, absolutely, absolutely. Matter of fact, in present day China, my master, she's not only a woman, but she's the head of the temple, the abbess of the Jianfu Shrine at Qingshan, which is the original Taoist temple from 142 AD. But she's also the Secretary General of the China Taoist Association, meaning she's over 93 million Taoists. The only person above her is the minister. So Taoists have always believed in educating women. They've always believed in it. But when Confucianism came around, it was like, women are a cog in a machine. Everybody's a cog in a machine. If you're a first son, second son, third son, first son, you know your job. Second son, you know your job. First daughter, you're getting married to some wealthy guy to make an alliance. Second daughter, well, your ass is probably going to be Jan Brady. It's always going to be Marsha.
Was there a caste system like India?
Not originally, no. Eventually, yes, because of Buddhism. When Buddhism infiltrated and infected China, they brought this concept of caste system. But China, didn't have that. And so it was really, but Confucius put hierarchical pecking orders. So first son is way more important than first daughter. Why? Because yang and yin, heaven and earth. Heaven's more important, right? And but he went so far as to say, like, well, the emperor of heaven has 1,000 rooms in his palace. So the emperor on earth, well, he should not be, presumptuous. So he only has 999 and a half rooms because he was just dumb shit. just ridiculous stuff. But Taoism originally was just like, oh, I just can't make this. All makes my head hurt. But Confucianism sort of grew out of this need to get 7 warring countries to come to heal and come together, and it worked. So for the time, Confucianism was a great thing. It's just that it became, like all great systems, doesn't matter what it is, it can be used for despotism just as much as it can be used for...
Say that again, what?
You can be used for despotism, right? For despot, for tyranny, because the very freedoms that people and rights that people want are all predicated on one thing: responsibilities. And Taoists have always known this. But people are like, well, I'm second son, so I don't have to do that because of you. And you feel entitled to something. And no, we were given these rights. It's like, yes, but that right is predicated on a responsibility. And if you abdicate your responsibility, I don't give a shit if you're second son or first son or the emperor's son. You talk shit, you're going to get put on your ass. That's just how it works. And, but...
So let me just jump in with this. In terms of utopian societies, which sounds like what Confucius and what all these systems are trying to do is create a utopian society. How would Taoists look at utopian societies?
Taoists thought it was the biggest waste of time and the biggest stupid thing in the world, because utopian societies are based on somebody's arbitrary assumption of what utopia means. But if you look at the dung beetle, it thinks a big pile of poop is utopia. But the dragonfly's like, yeah, no, that's okay, right? So you there's no such thing as utopia. The basic assumption, right? Artists, mathematicians, physicists, all scientists, really, they all start with an assumption of something. You have to start with fundamental assumptions. The Taoist fundamental assumption in life is the world's already perfect. Your job is not to make the world perfect or utopian, it already is. Your job is to make it, to accord yourself with it. That's why you must find your nature and then live accordingly to it. So if you have a feline nature, you should be living that way. And let's say your parents were bovine or equestrian in nature. Well, then maybe you and your parents, can have Thanksgiving, but maybe it's best that you don't. And why? Because your natures weren't compatible. And that can happen. It can happen all the time. And that's okay. You don't have to have the same nature as anybody else. You have no mandate to make sense to the rest of the world. You have no mandate to be anything other than what you are. That's Taoist. You understand and accept your own nature and then find out how to harmonize it with the greater nature. It's as simple as that.
What is the difference between Taoism and Buddhism?
I'm going to be very nice here.
I know. You better be very nice because you were raised by Buddhists. So.
Buddhism is oftentimes misunderstood by Buddhists, not because they're bad and I'm some sage, but I was raised, as you said, with 8 Buddhist monks, 2 Chan from China, 2 Tibetan, 2 from Thailand, which are Theravada, 1 from Laos, 1 from Cambodia. So I got this really big, over 30,000 foot view of what Buddhists believe. So Tibetan Buddhism is not Tibetan Buddhism. It's Tantric Buddhism as practiced in Tibet. And Tantric Buddhism is a hell of a lot different than Chan Buddhism, which is what Zen is.
Right.
And the Theravada Buddha, that dude is dour as the day is long. Like, you do not want Theravada Buddha coming to your birthday party or your bar mitzvah. Let's just be honest. Theravada Buddha is like, Jesus, you need. But, and Vajrayana Buddha is even crazier. The idea with Buddhism is a very straightforward thing, but most Buddhists just won't get it because, like with a lot of the New Age stuff, they want to make it all things to all people. Buddha, Gautama, left home because he was kept now, and people don't really think of the story very well, but you really have to think of it. You're an 18-year-old kid. You've been able to have sex anytime you want, eat anything you want when you want, only surrounded by beautiful young people all your life. You got a kid. Every possible whim you have is fulfilled. And then at 18 years old, you find out it was all a lie. You find out there's death, there's sickness. You find out all these things. and your whole world, like you have to think of the bedrock of your belief about reality. It's all gone. And you're like, literally, what the hell just happened to me? And so he's going to go find the cure for suffering. But really, he has to find the cure for his own suffering, is what he's doing.
Right.
Because he doesn't
We're
understand
always
it.
doing, right?
Sure, because for him, he'd never experienced suffering a day in his life. So if you've never experienced suffering a day in your life, and you think of the time that he actually lived, that means he never got a cold. He never got the flu. You lived your whole life to 18 in this idealistic whatever, and then you find out, yeah, that shit ain't like that at all. And you're just like, literally, what does that do to you? Even think about psychologically what that would do to you.
He was he lived in the very first safe space.
Right. And there was a cry room, and he had his trigger words, he had the trigger warnings. So he goes and lives with the untouchables. He goes and lives with the samanas. Oh, Jesus, right? The India's caste system, the ones that are even so low, they don't even have a caste called the untouchables, the samanas. And the samanas look down on people like, you're a piece of shit. You eat. Ugh. Yeah. You wear clothes. Kind of people. And so he goes and lives with them. Now, again, nobody really parses this out. You're this pretty boy, smelling great, fine, perfect face, coiffed hair with oil, and you're hanging out with the samanas. You can imagine the hazing. We're guys. I don't give a shit what time they lived in. There was hazing. They were just like, hey, pretty boy, you got a pretty mouth. Come here. I'm going to show you how to do the samana way. He's probably like, what? Every samana had to do this? Yeah. Right? So he has to go, and it's baking his skin. It's baking the skin off his lips. It's frying him in the sun, because samanas just sit and sit and sit and sit. Hot, cold, brambles, thorns, doesn't matter. They put huge austerities on their body. But from a kid from a palace with nothing but silk touching his buried backside to brambles and thorns and sunburns, I mean, you see this, and until one day, as the story goes, he's sitting on the banks of the Ganges, and he hears a grandfather and his granddaughter with the lyre, and he's too tight, it'll snap, too loose, there's no resonance, the middle way. Now, what does the middle way mean to him? Well, if you've lived a palace life and a samana's life, you realize those are your extremes. You got to get that middle way. And he sits under a Bodhi tree, because obviously he has no job. He sits under a Bodhi tree for 9 years, and he realizes that suffering comes from resisting what is. Simple as that. Nothing more. And so he comes up with the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. All life is suffering. All life is suffering because of our attachments. All life is suffering because of our attachments, but we can overcome it. All life is suffering because of our attachments. We can overcome it by following the Eightfold Path. That's the Four Noble Truths.
I'm gonna have you bring your microphone just a little closer. I'm missing a little bit of your
Okay. Thank you. So that's the Eightfold, the Four Noble Truths. And after that, he teaches one thing: cessation of suffering. But you cannot be a Buddhist if you do not renounce everything, because that's what Buddha did. You can follow Buddha's precepts. You can use Buddhist philosophy to enhance your life, but you're not a Buddhist. To be a Buddhist, shave your head, wear a sarong, and take your ass out and all. That's the path of the Buddha. There's no other path for the Buddhist. So a Buddhist monk is considered a Buddhist. All the lay people, all the householders, they're never considered Buddhist. They'll tell you that because they want you to put your donations in the damn bowl, but you're not a Buddhist. Because you haven't given up suffering, and you haven't given up attachments as they understand it. But Buddha never said or told anybody those things. Eventually that happened, and people go out to the Garden of Jacob and they did that. Okay, great. But Buddha would teach all sorts of people, and he didn't give a shit. Stop resisting what is. Simple.
And that's really pretty much what Taoism is, isn't it?
That has a huge impact on Taoism, but it's only one half of the equation. So it can't really be, in that part, Buddhism and Taoism have much of the same. But Buddhism and Taoism, while they're going the same direction, go about it very different ways, because it's not just about cessation of resisting, but it's about learning to accept and allow. That's the highest cultivation. But that is not for a Buddhist. This is not true. Although Buddhists want to, by definition, to stop resisting, which means to accept. But it's all Maya. It's all an illusion. This is all Leela. Not for a Taoist. This is the point, right? Buddhist, here's point A. Here's point B. Nirvana, samadhi. Okay, great. So if you're going to do this at B, just start at A doing that until you get to B. Just do it all the way. And the Buddhist is like, that part between A and B, that's the grit. That's the grind. Get the fuck in there. Get in that. Just you get dirty and get nasty with it. And the reason why is because that's the Tao. That's the point. Or else why are you here? It makes no sense. If somebody told me, what's the quickest way to nirvana? Put a gun in your mouth. I promise you. You will get it all in that second. You will. And then you'll be free of all the Maya and all the attachment. Well, you'll still be on the wheel of samsara. Of course you will. But you're still on the wheel of samsara right now before you do that. So what's the difference? Oh, but the karma and the bardo. Well, if you keep trying to resist the bardo and the samsara, you're going to get more of it. To a Taoist, it's like, look, everything that's going to happen is going to happen. Regardless of what you want, what you like, what you need. It doesn't matter. How can you accord yourself with it so you can perform the everyday alchemy, which is turn everything to your advantage, find the empowering meaning.
Say that again. Turn everything to your advantage and
find the empowering meaning.
The empowering
Meaning.
Okay. Meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just go back to just the basic word of Tao. It's spelled DAO sometimes or TAO. And it's pronounced DOW, Tao.
Mm-hmm.
What is the meaning of that word? What does it mean?
The meaning in the character literally means the way. And so people say, okay, what does that mean? When the concept by Zhang Daoling, which is the Taoist immortal that actually coined the term, Tao is a meaning following the Tao, the follower of Tao, is that much like Confucius, trying to figure out a way to get 7 kingdoms together, the world was going through an axial age. The Jews were asking, like, what's our relationship to God? The Greeks were asking, why am I here? Who am I? The Taoists were asking the question, what is the way? Meaning, what is the way that the man from Zhou, the man from Wu, the man from Qin, what is the way that we all live that makes us united, that makes us really one, that gets rid of the distinctions, it gets rid of the separations, the duality, and makes it not two? And so I love my kids. You love your kids. Okay, well, that's the way. Obviously loving our kids, having affection for our children. I deserve respect. You deserve respect. Okay, well, obviously respecting each other, that's the way. You find that Taoism is so practical that people are like, so did Taoism come up with feng shui? Not overtly, but feng shui is literally this. If it's cold outside, put a jacket on. If it's hot outside, take your fucking jacket off. This is the way. Simple as that. It's very practical. Don't bury your dead upstream or upwind. Feng shui, wind, water, right? Taoism is, what is the way that all things work? What are the processes that all processes are stages of, that if we accord it, we are all literally living like fish in a river, or like animals in the forest, right? The forest houses the jaguar, and it houses the antelope, and it houses the dung beetle, and it houses the fungus. And there's a place for everything, and everything contributes to the experience of everything. This is the way. It's the over process of all processes.
What would the cosmology of Taoism be then? If you would look at it, where did everything begin, and what is the concept of yin and yang and the principles of Taoism?
So it's actually not too dissimilar to all the other perennial wisdom traditions. Kabbalah actually shares a great amount of it. At some point, we don't even know what that's called. We don't know. There's a point, but we don't understand it. It's beyond conceptualization. But consciousness itself, and I mean your awareness, you and I are talking, we're aware of each other, but there's consciousness beyond our awareness, just as there's light spectrums beyond our visible bandwidth. And so consciousness itself went and became self-aware. We don't know what that point is, but we do know that that's a point. And then from there, so prior to that point, it's called Hundun, or primordial chaos, or pre-celestial Bagua. But then it says the Tao passes through. That Tao, you could say, is awareness. And then it becomes being, what am I? Now, the Western traditions differ very greatly here. This is where we bifurcate. The Western traditions say it starts to go and add up all things, gematria, whatever, and it adds up all these things to figure out what it is. But the Taoists or the Buddhists even go the opposite direction. I'm going to cast out everything that I'm not in order to come to the essence of what I am. So this is where ones and zeros really where it starts. The concept of zero came from the East. The Arabs brought it, right? Arabic numerals. There was no zero in Roman numerals or Greek times. Everything started with one because you have to have something to create something. You can't create something from nothing. That's logos. That's logic. But in Taoism, it's like, no, that's literally the only thing that can create anything is nothing. The no thing creates thing. So when the Tao passes through the Wuji, or the vast emptiness, and empty doesn't mean that's vacuous. It means that literally it's everything undifferentiated. Then it becomes what's called the Tai Chi. The Tai Chi is the yin and yang symbol. And so the yin, which is the black with a little white dot, that's everything feminine, everything internal, everything stable, everything heavy, everything dark, everything cold. All of these things which are substance, that's yin. Yang by is masculine, light, hot, bright, active. And so you would say that yang is function. So yin is substance, yang is function. So if your heart inside of your chest, the actual muscle tissue itself is yin. But that's yang.
Yeah.
So when people say, so how do they play against each other? I put my hand on my chest. I cannot feel the yin, but through the yang, I know the state of the yin. And so if I do an angiogram, or if I do a chest x-ray or an MRI, then I look at the yin, which will help me to understand the function of the yang.
Right.
But they are not separate from each other. One creates the other creates the other. So when people say yin and yang is sort of the balance of two opposing forces, no, they're not two forces. It's one circle still. It's two aspects of the same thing, like particle and wave, like matter and energy. This is Tai Chi. This is the yin and yang. And from that, now you get the three treasures.
So which we're going to get into in the next video. But I also want to just with the yin and yang theory. So one of the things that they talk about is it's all about harmonizing yin and yang. And the bigger the yin, the bigger the yang. And so what's this idea in Taoism about balancing harmony and that middle path?
So in that case, this is where we go back to the original question you had about Taoism. You've got to learn to, when you talk about balance, balance is not what a lot of people think. They think balance means equilibrium. That's not balance. It's going to be this constant up and down, right? It's like a sine wave. There's an up and a down. As there's just as many ups as down, yes, well, okay, there's balance. But two, and here's where people go, well, help me to bring balance into my life, Lao. And I'm like, well, that's simple, but you're not going to do it. You've got to learn to accept who you are. That's where people get out of balance. They want all the yummy, good, bright, socially acceptable, non-toxic, masculine, whatever bullshit about themselves. But all this other part that's actually still part of them, they want to somehow excise that. You ain't getting rid of it. So if you accept these 5 virtues, but you hate these 5 vices, well, then you're out of balance. And people say, so what if I'm petty and I'm jealous? I'm supposed to accept that? Yeah, because you're petty and fucking jealous. I mean, acting like it doesn't exist doesn't change what it is. It just makes you turn it away, right? This is where the saying in the West comes from. the worst trick the devil ever played was convincing man he didn't exist, right? So all of your vices that you're like, no, that's not me, and then they're just running rampant in your behavior in your subconscious, and you're blaming everybody else for them, but it's you. You have to look at it. Are you a petty bitch? Of course you are. We're all petty bitches. I know I'm a petty bitch. But understanding I'm a petty bitch, that and accepting that, now I figure out what are my triggers. What are the things that, and what are the contexts that could exist that a petty bitch might be a good thing? Because everything has a position or a place where it can actually flourish. Right? If you're like, well, I want to get rid of my anger, you're an asshole. Anger is a beautiful thing. If you're depressed, get mad. Your ass will get the fuck up. If somebody comes in your house to hurt your children at night, you don't get mad. No, I just want to be like, this most worthy. Don't be a dumb bitch. Get the heck. All right. This is Westerners really mix a lot of Semitic belief systems. Like, well, the immortals, the saints, or the angels, they're always loving and benevolent. It's like, have you read a book? Michael the Archangel killed a fucking dragon. There was war in heaven. Samael is the archangel of the seventh heaven who lives in the fifth, and he causes all men to do evil like God's will. Like, get a fucking book, man. Read shit. Taoism's the same way. Every Taoist immortal, whether they're very high level or not, they all have naughty natures. They're very benevolent too, but they're also naughty. Like Monkey King, who I just happen to find as a patron saint. He's completely naughty. But he's also very altruistic. He's working through his shit too. The difference between an immortal and you is not that they have transcended their foibles, is that they've learned to integrate them into themselves and become an actualized person. They've learned to find real balance. And that's the way it must be. Mm-hmm. We're not body, we're not spirit, we're both. We're not divine and we're not profane, we're both. And there has to be a place where, and we'll get into this in another one with the Hun, Po, and all, where you have to accept each of those aspects and give them their reign.
Where, we're just going to finish up here, but where could people learn about Taoism? What books would you suggest, or how to learn about like really authentic Taoism?
Well, there's a lot of books. I would say it depends. If somebody wants a historical version of Taoism, I would say Monica Esposito's books are pretty good. Roger Junke's books are pretty good in terms for historical Taoism. But that's, again, as expressed through China, where these concepts sort of flourish. But that's not necessarily practical. Because, oh, great, in the Tang Dynasty they did this. Okay, but what do you do? And if you're like, well, and I know a lot of people are like, where can I buy Taoist robes? I'm like, okay, pump the brakes. Hold on a second. Why do you want to buy Taoist robes? Are you fucking moving to the Tang Dynasty? And I don't know about it. Like, why are you buying Taoist robes? They're like, well, I just feel really called to Taoism. I'm like, how about stop being a dick? Buy robes after the dick quotient gets below a certain threshold. There's, in fact, a pharmaceutical dose and a lethal dose of dickhood. So just let's work on dick quotient. Then maybe you read you wear robes. But people want to try it out. But it's just going to lead to them saying Taoism's stupid, doesn't work, or whatever. Because this isn't the Tang Dynasty. Taoism has always been revolutionary. I would say practical Taoism, read Byron Katie's books. Because while she's not going to talk about yin and yang and the three treasures explicitly per se, I mean, it's in there, but you just know what you're reading. But it teaches you not to be an asshole to yourself, not to believe your thoughts, to accept your nature, to do your judge your neighbor workshops. And I don't have any dog in this fight. I'm not getting paid by Katie. I've never sat down with her. But I know her work. I understand what she's trying to say. And if you live that, you are on the first pathway, which is to become a Genman or an actualized person. I don't know if I'd care more about you get these concepts in your head so you understand the three treasures versus you can live them and be a decent goddamn human being to yourself in the world. So it depends, right? If you want Eva Wong, right? Seven Taoist Masters, it's a great version there. James Miller, which is Olivia Kahn's sort of student, apprentice, teacher's aide, whatever. He wrote Taoism, A Short Introduction. That's a really good like Polaroid snapshot of each individual step. That's a pretty good one for people who want the more academic and sort of intellectual process for it. So it just depends on
what are places that people could go to get teachers, or how do you know that there's a teacher, a good one for Tao?
I honestly have found in my life that you don't want to start with a good teacher. I know that sounds really dickish, but you don't, because when you get a good teacher and you don't know it's a good teacher because you never had a teacher before. And then you go and you think that, let's say something happens, they die or whatever, and then you find somebody after that. You're expecting, well, it's a teacher, and then they just destroy you and they break your heart, and you're like, what the actual hell just happened? And then you end up having real issues with teachers and all. There's the old saying that's way overdone, cliche. When the student's ready, the teacher will come. But you're going to get teachers every day of your life. Could be the lady at DMV who's just an asshole to you, and they, teaches you a lot about your nature. It could be the IRS. But when you're ready, there will be somebody, and it could be an Aikido teacher. It could be a gardening teacher. It could be, and you'll find people along the way who they sort of help along your path. And then when and if, and not everybody is ready to say, hey, I'm just going to get on this Tao path, because it sucks. It's not fun. Who thinks it's fun? You're playing costume again if you think this isn't fun, because you've got to get to the bottom of all your bullshit. You got to undo an identity you spent a lifetime creating. And that's like doing a root canal on yourself, through an enema. It's just, it's not easy, but it's worth it. And you go, and along the way, and if you're like me, you just learn to laugh, and you're like, meh, meh. But, there are teachers out there. I don't recommend you going and looking for a teacher first. I recommend you going to understand yourself. I would recommend reading Carl Jung. I'd recommend reading Jordan Peterson's book. I'd recommend doing Katie's work. Hell, I would even say, and this sounds like I'm totally defecting to the wrong camp, but I would even say Pema Chodron for some people who's had certain childhood incidents and adolescent incidents. Because, when you're a baby, your brain, right? So when you're a baby, you have your true nature, which is identical to the true nature of the Tao. The baby literally gives zero fucks. Mom's out there smoking crack, dad's shooting up banks, the baby's just zenned out, just don't give a damn. But then you become from then to a toddler, when you leave your true nature, become part of your original nature, you got more goddamn brain neural synaptic, like 200 trillion neural synapses, right? Which are way more than you'll ever need, way more than you'll ever have. But then the circumstances of your life will start to form which pairs fire more often. And so that's where you go through your adolescence and your adulthood. And now you've got these pathways who fired so many times that they stayed, and the other possible ones, potential ones, they all atrophied. Well, this is why some people are like, I have all this phobia, or I have all this anxiety, or I have, I'm shaped by my, growing up. Well, yeah. But can it be undone? Well, sure. Neuroplasticity is a beautiful thing, but it takes work. And it takes work that you've got to be able to remember the map from the terrain. Your experience of the world growing up is not the world. It's the map that you were given, and it's a shitty map. But the funniest part is when people try to get off that shitty map, 99.99% of the time they fight. But it's my map. And it's like, but it's shitty. But I don't want you tearing it down. It's like, you obviously don't believe in the bitch because you came and found me. It's the craziest thing. It's
hard to give up your identity.
Yeah, because people want to defend an identity they don't even believe in anymore.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Because, well, my mommy gave it to me.
Who would I be? Who would I be without it, right?
Right. It's like, well, that's the whole point. Who would you be? There's the Sears catalog of life, Yeah. So yeah, and so that's where that comes down to.
Well, I think Katie's a really good place to go, and she's actually has a book called 1,000 Names for Joy.
Yeah.
And that is actually the Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching. So very good. I'm going to ask one last question, and that is, since you were raised Buddhist and you chose Taoism, why did you?
Because I knew I could never conform to Buddhism and my master knew too. He raised me both Buddhist and Taoist my whole life. So at the point but he knew long before. That's why he raised me both and not just Buddhist. But I had to be raised Buddhist because I was still in a Buddhist monastery. There was no way I was going to live in that monastery and not at least have the pretense of Buddhism. But Buddhism, you have to become celibate. You have to become renunciate. You have to become vow of poverty. You have to give up all these things. And it's like, okay, I can see the utility in that. But then why be here? Right? This world, I'm from San Francisco, and so it's very small. The little Chinese community, I mean, it's big compared to a lot of places, but it's a small, and it's a very small place for somebody who wants to know so much. And I don't want to know, I want to experience it. So I've lived in 50 countries, and, I've studied, I don't know how many traditions, not because I cared about dogma, because I just wanted to understand the way. And so I studied math and science and physics, chemistry, language, humanities, art.
Did you ever go to college or university?
Yeah, I went to university, but I took a lot of classes. Like I took a Kabbalah with a Kabbalistic rabbi in Jerusalem. And the guy who was teaching me Talmud and Torah, especially through Kabbalah. But there was a biblical scholar there who's from Germany. He was an atheist, but he knew the Bible backwards and forwards, the New Testament. And so I learned to read it in Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew. So a lot of my problems with school was that school has an agenda of what they want to teach you in terms of this is the curriculum, you must learn this. Mm-hmm. But 99% of the time, the shit they want me to learn is completely extraneous to, well, so what? I mean, there are a lot of derelicts with a PhD. I mean, I want to know, like, how does this really fit into life and how does this answer? So I'm more like Benjamin Franklin than I am Leonardo da Vinci as a polymath. If it's in front of me, I want to learn it. How does this fit? How does this work? And why does it work that way? And school doesn't want to teach you. It wants to tell you the way that it's supposed to be done according to an academic consensus of people who fucking do nothing all day, but tell people how shit should be done, but don't actually do it. So, interestingly enough.
Well, with that, I think we'll leave it there. We're going to talk about the three treasures and also about what they have to do with sexuality.